We don't have maize. Our association had offered up to 4,200 shilling a bag of maize. In spite of offering that price, we could not get adequate supplies. Now, obviously, you would ask, in January, the price of 2 kilo packet of maize meal was 65 to 70 shillings. Today is 150 shillings. The reason being, we do not have maize. Only about 2 weeks ago, legal notice was published. Everyone was invited to import maize, which at the moment we are aggressively importing to remove the supply constraint in the market. So what we feel, that instead of meeting every 2.5 years and having a crisis meeting, and having a quick fix solution, it's time we think long term. Because our population is growing, our food production is coming down. Like I said, we have an annual deficit of about 4 million bags. What do we do? What is medium to short term? I mean, short term, all right, we have opened up the import window, which would relieve some pressure on the prices, we hope, as soon as we get enough maize. The maize, of course, is coming from Zambia and Malawi. Ultimately, we'll have to look for, if they put any restriction, if those countries put any restrictions for their own domestic consumption, then we'll have to turn to South Africa. South Africa today produces GMO maize. So this would be the short-term solution. Fine, we import GMO and non-GMO maize into the country, at least to satisfy our consumers and Kenyans. But we should also, at the same time, after having sorted out this problem, not forget it, not put all the problems under the carpet. We should seriously look into the medium to long-term solution for this country. And obviously, there are various solutions available. One, adoption of biotechnology, which is globally accepted. And I'm sure we got the scientists here who will elaborate on that issue. I'm not a technical man. Number two, we need to bring more land into production through irrigation, because we are heavily reliant on rain-fed agriculture. Days are numbered. It's not in our hands, it's the climatic change which is taking place globally. But as far as the GMO maize is concerned, only registered millers will be allowed to import and account for every bag. And we as an association have agreed to keep our own internal control to make sure that the imported GMO bag doesn't get into the hands of the farmer. And this is on top of other regulation by the government. This will be our own association regulation to account for every bag imported into this country. And that record and report will be available to Kenyans to make sure no farmer uses for planting. Thank you.
GM crops or GM foods have been commercialized since 1996. My colleague mentioned that. And we have seen a progressive adoption since 1996. And 1996 and today is close to 17 years. I've never seen any record showing that use of GM products has directly, and I use the word directly, caused maybe this and that or this and that. So take it that they are safe, and it's not just saying that they are safe, they are subjected to safety tests before they are passed for human consumption. And before they are passed, it's regulatory agencies, like in Kenya we have the National Biosafety Authority. In South Africa we have the equivalent of that. In the US we have about 3 agencies that have to concur that it's safe before they are passed for human consumption. I think what can harm Kenya now, as we speak, with the shortage of maize that is acute right now, is the failure to import maize in this country in the coming 1 week. That is what can harm Kenya, not blocking it. I rest my case.
So there is 15 years of experience with genetically modified crops, and even very specifically maize, which has been grown in different countries of the world. In 2010, for example, there were 15.4 million farmers throughout the world that were growing genetically modified crops. Now, these farmers, 90% were from developing countries of Asia, Latin America, and very importantly in Africa. We do have 3 countries in Africa now that have approved commercial cultivation of genetically modified crops. These are South Africa, that is growing maize, soybean, and cotton. We have Burkina Faso in West Africa that is growing cotton. And we have Egypt that has also started growing genetically modified maize. So currently there are 29 countries that have officially declared that they are growing on commercial scale genetically modified crops. 19 of these countries are again from the developing world. When you look at the hectareage, how much is grown, we find that we are currently having about 148 million hectares of land under genetically modified crops. This, ladies and gentlemen, is not small. To put into perspective, you would say it's almost comparable to the whole total land surface area of China or even the whole of USA. Now, if you look at the population that is living in those 29 countries that are commercially growing biotech crops, 4 billion out of the 6 billion or so of the world population live in those countries. Over 4 billion people, meaning that these people have already either interacted with the crops through growing, or they have eaten this the produce from genetic modification, and they have traded with these crops.
Now, for us to be able to overcome these problems, we are forced to use a lot of expensive, let me insist on expensive chemicals, fertilizers. We are looking at pesticides. We are looking at all these chemicals that control diseases, which also poison our environment. If we don't use them, we don't have enough production. So we should be looking for solutions that we can avoid for us to protect our environment. Now, one solution to these areas is having new varieties, new plant varieties that are able to overcome some of these problems that we have. Breeding, for some of you who may know, can take up to 10 to 13 years to produce one variety, using the traditional or conventional methods. However, because of the time and the requirement of producing new varieties regularly, scientists have gone through several methods of coming up with ways of reducing that period. And one of them is the modern biotechnology.